Hey everyone, and welcome to this episode of The Chocolate Life Live. My name is Clay Gordon. I'm the creator and the moderator of TheChocolateLife.com. I've been working on building community in cocoa and chocolate, for as long as I can remember. And I want to welcome everybody to today's episode of The Chocolate Life Live, where we're going to be talking about something that I've been working on in one form or another for close to a year. It's at least something I've been talking about. And I want to share it with you, but I want to remind everybody who is watching to go into the comments and let me know where you're connecting in from today. I'd like to know where in the world people are connecting from, where they're watching from, where they're participating from, and I'll give you a shout out and acknowledge the fact that you're here and joining me today, and I appreciate that. And also let you know that if you have any questions at all about anything during the course of this live stream, just put them into the comments and I will get to them during the course of the live stream. Just, we'll put them up on screen and I will go over them. And I'm really excited for this because it's a really interesting topic. And it's also the first time where I've posted this. I've been promoting it on Instagram since yesterday, where the conversation has started on Instagram before it started here on The Chocolate Life. And so I'm interested in getting to that. And then before we begin, I want to say hello to Giovanni, who's connecting from Boca Raton. Giovanni, I heard that it's going to get cold down there as well. I mean, it's been pretty cold here for the last couple of days. It gets down to minus 12 degrees centigrade tomorrow, which is pretty darn cold. And then it's going to be a similar kind of temperature on Christmas Day. So just hope wherever you are in the United States and wherever you are in the world that you're safe and you're warm and you're dry and that you have a great weekend. Yes, Giovanni, I heard that it's going to be cold down in Florida. So, I don't know what it'll do to this year's orange crop, but hopefully it won't be too bad. So I want to start off just by sharing my screen. So this is the homepage of The Chocolate Life right now. And I will say that for every single episode of The Chocolate Life Live, I create a post. And if you go click on this post, what you'll do is you'll see, here's my introduction to today's post. So you can get a chance to take a look at what it is that we're talking about. And if you want to be notified of these, you can become a member of The Chocolate Life, and you'll get notifications as a paid member every single time a new post gets put up on the screen. And so here's where you go and find the archive of this live stream, resources in advance. There's a click to visit the Chocolate Wire channel on YouTube, so you can find the entire archive of everything that we've done. This is episode number 76. And that in the future, if you wanted to watch this on YouTube or on LinkedIn or on Facebook, the links to do that are there as well. If you're a LinkedIn member or you've got a Facebook account, you can go see them. They're there. So that's it. So you'll notice that I updated the post this morning, and I clicked through to this article, which is about the $100 bar of chocolate. And it gives a little more insight into what it is that I want to talk about today. And so it's there, so you could refer to it later. You don't need to go to it right now. You don't need to get the URL. You don't need to go to it right now, but you'll be able to get to it in the future. So the $100 bar of chocolate. My reasoning for this is that when you think about it, we have the $10 bottle of wine, the $100 bottle of wine, and the $1,000 bottle of wine. And in real terms, it doesn't cost a whole lot more to produce the $1,000 bottle of wine than it does to make the $100 bottle of wine. You're talking a lot about marketing and other kinds of peripheral activities that are separate from the actual manufacturing process. The cost of the grapes may be slightly more. The cost of labor may be slightly more. There are going to be costs associated with aging. Maybe the bottles are slightly more expensive, but there's nothing fundamentally different between the cost of production of the $100 bottle of wine and the $1,000 bottle of wine. What is different about those two things is that the $1,000 bottle of wine and the $100 bottle of wine, to a large extent, make sure that there is enough money in the system to be able to pay people to tell you why it's okay to spend $1,000 on a bottle of wine, right? So if there were no such things as sommeliers, if there were no such things as wine critics, how would you, if there was no collector market for wine, why would the cost of a bottle of wine be so high, right? And the answer is there's an ecosystem of things, right, which exists that props up the notion that these wines are in fact worth up to $1,000 or more a bottle, easily at more than $1,000 for a bottle. But it is this notion about the economics of wine that what we might want to do is we might want to take a look at the economics of wine and think about how they apply into the economics of chocolate. Now, with any analogy, you need to be very, very careful about how far you push the analogy, because there will be a place where it breaks down, right? So it's important to understand, I think, to sort of preface this argument about the $1,000 bottle of wine and the $100 bottle of chocolate, is to realize that the modern chocolate movement, what we think is the modern craft chocolate movement or the modern bean to bar movement, is in fact modern, right? Arguably it didn't exist before 1984. And what happened in 1984 is that the Bonat family introduced, for the 100th anniversary of the company, a series of 7 single origin chocolates. And a couple of years later, Valrhona introduced Mangiare. And from there we have this growth in an understanding and appreciation for chocolate that is fundamentally different from what it was prior to that time. It's also important to understand that chocolate as we know it today, industrial chocolate as we know it today, is a product of the Industrial Revolution. So prior to the Industrial Revolution, chocolate was a luxury for many people. And most people didn't have a chance to eat it on a regular basis or consume it on a regular basis. I mean, Milton Hershey's genius is not that he knew how to make great chocolate. Milton Hershey's genius was that he made it affordable to everyone, right? By adding a lot of milk and a lot of sugar, right? And being able to find a way to be able to take mass production and apply it to this, right? But when we look at wine and we look at beer and we look at spirits and we look at cheese and other gourmet foods, they have traditions of connoisseurship, which date back hundreds, if not thousands of years, right? And what happened when the Industrial Revolution came around, that they were not divorced, right? These foods, like winemaking, was not divorced from its artisan heritage roots by the Industrial Revolution, right? Beer production was not divorced from its roots. Spirits, even, balsamic vinegar. I mean, we have AIB certified balsamic vinegar, 75-year-old, which costs, $2,000 a liter, right? So, but this stems from a tradition of balsamic vinegar production, which predates by centuries the Industrial Revolution. And so chocolate did not have this same tradition of appreciation and connoisseurship that all these other foods had, right? And the Industrial Revolution separated chocolate manufacturing from whatever artisan heritage it had, right, for more than 100 years, right? Well, maybe about 100 years, depending upon where you say here is the beginning of industrial chocolate making. Is it 1847? Is it which is when the Fry family first added cocoa butter to chocolate making? Was it 1879 with the introduction of the conch, with the, wherever you decide you want to put modern industrial chocolate, right? But the point being is that until beginning in the 1980s, and more specifically after the 1996 introduction by Scharfenberger of their first chocolates, that this is the first time we see any real movement towards the creation of a tradition of connoisseurship associated with making chocolate, right? And all these other foods have had it for centuries, if not thousands of years. And so the economics of chocolate become very, very different for that reason. There's no collector market for chocolate. I mean, chocolate as a general rule, does not improve with age. I can't go and buy a bar of chocolate, put it away in a climate and humidity controlled cellar, and then in 10 years later, confidently predict that that bar of chocolate will be worth 2 or 3 or 4 times more, right, than it was when I bought that bar of chocolate in the first place. So there's no collector mentality associated with chocolate, because chocolate, for the most part, does not appreciate with age. And so we have to go and take a look at what are some of the things that chocolate does have that might work as levers in order to be able to increase its value, its perceived value, right? And this is where the idea of the $100 chocolate bar came to me, as I point out in this article on The Chocolate Life, the $100 bar of chocolate. It was published, it has a publication date of 2017 here. In fact, I think this predates the move of The Chocolate Life over to Maven. So this is probably on the Chocolate Life archive. And if I can find it on the archive, I'll put the link to it on the archive there. Is that in 2012, I was in London for the Academy of Chocolate conference. I was there for Chocolate Week in London before going to Amsterdam for the Origin Chocolate event. And I was in a panel called The Global Future of Chocolate. And luckily, I was at the last person to be able to speak. I love being the last person to speak, because what I get the opportunity to do is listen to what everybody else speaks and react to them. And in that particular case, I said to them, I presented, as it says here, 2 calls to action. Number 1 is that the chocolate industry needs professional certification programs, like ones that graduate professional sommeliers in wine. And this is something we're starting to see. We have the International Institute for Cocoa and Chocolate Tasting. They have a certification program. It is one. We probably need dozens of competing programs, each with its own approach to certification. But at least that first thing has happened, and I'm glad to hear about it. I don't know if this call to action was at all considered by the organizers of the IICCT, but I also made the point that the chocolate industry needs a $100 bar of chocolate, right? And I go through a lot of my rationale here in the post, right? And for me, I think that the challenge becomes, number 1, why do we want to do something like this? Why is there the need? Why do I perceive the need, and why do others perceive the need for a $100 bar of chocolate? And before I get there, I want to say hello to Scarlett. Hey, Scarlett, thanks for checking in from Columbus. Hope you're doing well. Hope it's not freezing too badly there, and you don't get snowed in or otherwise have problems with the weather over the upcoming weekend. So some of you, and I don't know if he's here in the conversation right now, may know of Juan Gonzalez. Now, Juan is a friend of The Chocolate Life. I've known him for many, many years. He has a business in Canada called the Mexican Arabica Bean Company, and he imports cocoa beans and coffee into Canada and then distributes it from there. And I posted this yesterday, and his immediate response, and what I should probably do is see if I can actually get the post up. It's not going to allow me to do it easily, so excuse me for that. I'm in an incognito window there, so that's why it won't allow me to do it. But in any event, sorry for putting my attention on the other screen. So one of the things that Juan responded with was that he thought that the idea of a $100 bar would in fact harm the craft chocolate world. And his argument was, if I can quote it, is that quote, this is ridiculous, a very overpriced chocolate bar that's going to harm the bean to bar business and give more room to cheap chocolate from the big companies. Please know the chocolate bar can be so expensive, only you can cover it in gold leaf, no matter how many things they invent to promote it. And I replied, I hope that this hour will provide you with evidence that may change your mind. And he comes back to me and says that a good chocolate should be in the reach of everyone, a good price, not to only those who can buy a $100 bar. This is not Gucci or Chanel. And I have a response to that as well that I'm going to share here over the course of the rest of the hour. And so the question I ask for all of you is, do you agree with Juan? Do you agree that the $100 bar of chocolate would be harmful to the craft chocolate industry or the bean to bar chocolate industry? Do you think that that by having some bars that are not affordable to everyone, that this becomes a problem for the entire industry? So please let me know in the comments if you believe like Juan does, or if you have some other opinion that you'd like to share. And if you do that, get it up on the screen, and I'll be happy to discuss it with you over the course of the rest of the hour. What I think that Juan says there, and the part of it that I really do agree with in what it is he has to say, is that whatever we do with respect to the $100 bar of chocolate is that it can't be a gimmick. Now, we have the world's most expensive truffle, which, as Juan suggests, happens to be covered in edible gold. And it is the cost of the edible gold that, for the most part, makes the truffle really expensive. The packaging that's associated with it. It's not actually the truffle itself. I mean, it's using industrial chocolate, right, from a company one of a number of companies that we all know of. There's nothing special about the chocolate itself. There's nothing really special about the ingredients themselves, right, that would contribute to the price of the truffle. It's mostly about the gold leaf. Now, if I were using something really expensive, like I were putting Louis XIII cognac, which might be somewhere between $3,000 and $5,000 a bottle, and I was using it to make the ganache, yes, my piece would be expensive. But why would that truffle cost $1,000? Right? There's no reason for it. There was another company that was doing something that was branded around diamonds and jewels, and so there were like cubic zirconia and other kinds of things which are embedded in the chocolate or embedded in the boxes. And it had nothing to do with the chocolate itself, still using industrial couverture as the base chocolate. The idea to raise the price for these things was all around the marketing, the gimmicks, what they were doing outside the actual chocolate itself, right, in order to be able to get the value of the bar up. And this is, one of the things where people will normally chime in, hey, Clay, what about TOAC? So also on the Chocolate Life, when you go to the page with the $100 chocolate bar article, you'll see a link to to two articles that I've written about TOAC. One from 2021, in early 2021, and one just a couple of weeks ago. And what I want to point out is that, so the question of value is an individual question that each of us has to answer. Is this particular thing that I'm purchasing worth what it is that I'm paying for it? And in that respect, every single one of us has our own basket of attributes. It's just like quality. Is it worth it to us? But what I would say is that there are aspects of the TOAC chocolates which might lend themselves towards high value products in and of their own. Right. And one of those is going to be the fact that there's the claim that it's made with this very rare variety of Nacional cacao bean. Right. So it's a distinct genetics that has been tested, and it's grown only in very small quantities. And the people at TOAC are the only people who are growing it, and they can only make very small amounts of chocolate from it. And because of all these things, it is a very expensive chocolate. And that is a very, very defensible. Position to take. So there's scarcity associated with a particular kind of ingredient, and an approach to how things are manufactured. But I would say that the actual perception that most of us have, certainly the perception that I have when I think about TOAC products, is I think about this expensive mahogany box, this presentation box that the chocolate is presented in. And I think about the mahogany tweezers that are also a part of that box. And why are they using these tweezers? It's because if you were to touch the chocolate with your fingers, you would transfer the scent of your fingers onto the chocolate. And so I think there's a sort of precious pretentiousness that are associated with the tweezers. And I particularly, would put the tweezers and the box in the same context that I would put using gold leaf to increase the price of the product. It's not necessarily about the chocolate itself, it's about the presentation of the chocolate. Yes, they present themselves as a luxury brand. They present themselves as the luxury brand in chocolate. And so having a luxury presentation, right, makes absolute sense in the context of the luxury brand. And you have to decide if it's worth $250 for a 50-gram bar of chocolate or more in that presentation. What they also do is they take the beans themselves or the finished chocolate itself, and they will age it in barrels which contain expensive spirits. Right? And so the chocolate takes on the aroma of these expensive spirits or expensive woods or other ingredients. And it is this aging process in conjunction with these expensive spirits barrels that increase the value of the chocolate. And, certainly legit. I mean, if I'm going to use these expensive ingredients and go through an aging process, again, chocolate doesn't age normally, right? That's good. But at some point, right, it's not about the chocolate itself, I think. I don't think it's about the chocolate itself. It's about what is being done to the chocolate. And it is the specialness, it is the association with other luxury brands, right, that contribute to the cost of the chocolate. Again, I think that this is a totally legit way to go about doing it. This is a members only post. I'm sorry for that. But you can join. Membership is free. All you have to do is click on one of the join buttons and you'll be able to read this post. So yeah, and for me, like many things, it's about individual products. TOAC is a brand. I don't say that everything that TOAC makes is good. I might say, here's one of the things I like, here's one of the things I don't like, and here are aspects that are going on. One of the things I do talk about in this particular post is I do talk about the unboxing experience. And if you've got a luxury brand and you're buying one of their less expensive products at the point $45 or $50 for a 50-gram bar, then it needs to be a luxury unboxing experience. And I can certainly tell you it was a luxury unboxing experience. I had some issues with it, but it was really, really quite unusual. Now, knowing that many people think that their products are too expensive, TOAC did a collaborative partnership with a chef to create this new collection. It went on sale in early December, sort of in preview. It may be generally available now. You can go and order it. There's a link to order it on the website. You can click to visit the website. And I wrote an extensive review of this collection. It was photographed, it was sent to me. I tried each one of them. You'll get my impression for what it is that's going on. But what we have here is a luxury brand, right? That's saying many people perceive our chocolates as being too expensive. Can we create something that's less expensive, right? And my understanding is that a roughly 50-gram box is going to be on the order of $15. So that's really, really good. Which causes me, there are a bunch of questions which I ask in the stream or in this post. And you can go and read the post. It's extensive. It's 2,500, 3,000 words. I mean, I worked on this for over the course of 2 months from the time I've started it until the 2 months that I published it. Lots of thoughts that are going on there, as well as my individual impressions of every single chocolate, right? But one of the things this does is it brings me back to the discussion of what would it take, right, to make a bar of chocolate that members of the chocolate community, and I'm thinking about people who are serious connoisseurs of chocolate, many of whom are big fans of craft chocolate, many of whom don't see a problem with spending, $20 on a bar of chocolate from one of their favorite makers. Right? What is it going to take to make the $100 bar of chocolate worth it on its face? A bar of chocolate on its own, no gimmicks in terms of the wrapping, no gimmicks in terms of the packaging, no gimmicks in terms of what it is that we're doing to be able to quote unquote add value or enhance value to the chocolate. Just how do I make a bar of chocolate, right, that people would agree? What would be the approach that I would take? And I am really, really interested to know if you're watching right now, in addition to, clicking the like and a thumbs up and sharing and subscribing to the YouTube channel, all those things you can do, please go do. But please let me know, what do you think, right, would be, right, the elements that you'd say, I would be okay with spending $100 on this bar of chocolate. What would it take in your mind, right, to convince you? Now, here are a couple of other things. Number one of which is I am assuming that this $100 bar of chocolate is being tasted by dozens and dozens of the top chocolate judges and influencers in the world, and they're all giving it a thumbs up, right? The reason why I mention this from a personal experience is, in some respects, I've been thinking about this since 1994, when I was inspired to get into the chocolate business. I mean, I had this entrepreneurial epiphany where I said, I'm going to become the world's first professional chocolate critic, right? But I said, you know what? I really want to be the Robert Parker of chocolate, right? How do I become the Robert Parker of chocolate? I want to be an influence. I want people, right, to come to me and listen to what it is that I have to say. And I want them to move their purchasing decisions. I want them to say, I'm willing to try this because, hey, Clay, you know what you're talking about, right? And I think one of the disappointments that I've seen over the course of the last, now, what is it, 30 some odd years, 94, right? Is that there does not exist in the world of chocolate a personality or personalities that are as strong as Robert Parker. There is no one person who can go pick up a bar of chocolate, put it in their mouth, claim this is a 99, whatever 99 means, and all of a sudden the chocolate will go from being from costing $20 a bar to costing $40 a bar. That hasn't happened yet. And I personally don't know the circumstances which would make it possible for that to happen, right? There's not the same price elasticity in chocolate. And I don't know if it's the price elasticity question, which is keeping there from being a dominant influential person, or if it's the lack of a dominant influential person who is not been able to break through this price elasticity problem. I mean, I am more than happy, and many of us have experienced this, to walk into a restaurant, right? And we'll look at a wine list and we'll see a wine, and we know we can buy that wine in the liquor store for 30% of the price that it's sitting on, that's presented on the wine list, and why, right? Well, there are a bunch of reasons why, as an economic driver, and the difference between the cost of ingredients and the price of finished products. But, if there is a wine steward or sommelier or anybody who's in that restaurant, a lot of that markup goes to paying for that person, right, to come and sit with you at tableside and tell you this is the wine you want to have with your meal. Right? And so, yes, I can take an ounce of Valrhona chocolate, put it into a lava cake, and all of a sudden that lava cake, costs 15, 18, 20 bucks or more, depending upon the context in which you're eating it. The restaurant, if it's got 0 stars or 3 stars, lots of things will influence the price of that lava cake. But you're not going there because it is a specific chocolate, right? If they were to put that same amount of chocolate onto your plate and say, okay, well, we bought it for 49 cents and we're going to charge you for $5 for it. Unless there was some much, much more interesting, broader context in which that chocolate was presented, you're not going to be impressed by the sommelier's recommendation of this chocolate, right, with your dessert wine, for example. Right? It's not the way our minds work when we think about chocolate. I think part of that is because we start out eating chocolate, most of us, when we're very young, and so our thoughts about what chocolate is and how we consume it are very, very much driven by our early childhood experiences. We don't tend to drink coffee. We don't tend to drink wine. We don't tend to drink spirits until we're much, much later. It's also very interesting that they've been able to do this in coffee. I mean, starting with Howard Schultz and Starbucks, he went and changed everybody's mind. What we would normally walk into, the local diner and a little blue and white here in New York, a little blue and white cup, and we had our choices of regular or black, and regular could mean light with sugar, light no sugar. I mean, the regional differences in what light meant, but basically we had zero options, right, for what was in that little cup of coffee. And what Howard Schultz did is he said, okay, what can we do to make consuming chocolate part of a lifestyle, right? Not just something that we drank. And how can we get people who would normally be reluctant to pay more than $1 for this little 12-ounce cup of coffee to be willing to pay $4 or $5 multiple times per day, right? So origin is part of it. The ability to personalize, I would go in and I would have my particular, so it would be half calf, low foam, whatever it is that I want. My ability to personalize it, right, was part of what it is that they went on. There was some talk about, drips of different origins and different roasts and all of those kinds of things. But I think that the most important part of that was you could, in the beginning, right, and in some places, out of sight of Starbucks and in the specialty coffee house experience, you can speak to the barista, right? And the barista who's making your thing for you can tell you about a bean. He can tell you about acidity. He can tell you about the grind. He can tell you about the flavors. He can tell you all about these things, right? And there are a whole lot of chocolate shops in the world where you can that kind of one-on-one interaction. We have one here in New York City, the Meadow. There were a couple of others, but they've closed down during the pandemic. But for most people, buying chocolate is hit and miss. It's in a wrapper, and often the wrapper is a determinant. People will say, oh, part of the Mass Brothers' success, I believe, many other people believe, was the way it was wrapped. Part of the success of many brands is associated with packaging. We don't eat the packaging, right? And the packaging, it's about branding. It's important. It's about establishing who I am and as a brand, what it is that I'm for, all these other things. So very, very important. But what is it about the chocolate itself, right? That goes in it. So Giovanni talks and says, number one, cacao bean origin. Okay, so cacao bean origin. So let's think about that, about cacao bean origin. So do we think that, all right, so beans from Venezuela are very, very high quality beans, and therefore we should think about chocolate made from beans for Venezuela automatically being more expensive than, for example, chocolate made from beans from someplace in West Africa, right? Or Madagascar as opposed to someplace other than West Africa. So bean origin, I think, is actually part of a contributor to this. But to some extent, I think we've ruined that whole line of discussion, right? So how have we ruined that whole line of discussion? Excuse me, and Giovanni, thanks for making that observation. It turns out that when we think about wine, we do think about origin, and there is this mystique about French wine. So French wine is better than California wine. French wine is better than Australian wine. And objectively, that's not necessarily true, right? That the country in which a wine is made there's no 100% correlation. Now, winemaking education and winemaking technology is so widely spread around the world that when it comes to the technical aspects of making wine, it's hard to say that any one producing country is better than any other producing country. What we do have is this notion of grape varietal. So if I'm looking at a grape varietal, people will go, okay, I am buying Malbecs, or I don't like Pinot Noirs. So things are associated with varieties of grapes. And we do have this idea that, for example, a Carmenere grown in France as opposed to a Carmenere grown in someplace else, they're going to taste different because of terroir, right, that are associated with it. So in chocolate, we've invested millions of dollars, if not more, over the course of 20 years, talking about cocoa in a very, very unsophisticated way, right? We have 3 varieties of cocoa. This is what most people think. There are only 3 varieties of cocoa. We call them Criollo, we call them Forastero, and we call them Trinitario. And they don't talk anything about genetics when they do that. I mean, Criollo, these are linguistic terms. Criollo is a Spanish term. It was given by the conquerors, the Europeans who came into what is now Mexico. And Criollo just means from here, or it means native. So you might say Criollo, comida típica y criolla, right? So Criollo just means here, right? It doesn't say anything about the genetics of the beans, and it really doesn't even tell us anything about where the Criollo or Criolla is, right? I can be down in Peru, I can ask a farmer, and I have done this before, I've been in Peru, asked a farmer what kind of beans they are, and they'll go Criollo, and you have to ask them, are they genetic Criollos or are they abuelos? Are these the beans that your grandfather grew, and therefore they're the beans from here, right? And so we have that term associated with Criollo. We think of them as being better quality than other beans, right? That may be so. They're different, right? And like all cocoa beans, a lot depends upon whether or not your post-harvest processing is good and whether or not the trees are healthy. So there are lots of confounding factors there. And then we have Forastero, which just means foreign. They come from someplace else. So the beans that came from South America were the foreigner beans. And it turns out that those beans were where cacao originated, came from where cacao originated. The Criollos were genetically bred to be different, right? Genetic Criollos are different in fundamental ways, part of which is you can tell by the size of their genome, the number of base pairs in their genome, right? But we have some, and Trinitario, and is any bean that is a hybrid of Criollo and Forastero, but the first ones came from Trinidad. And I can tell you that the people in Trinidad are now trying to be able to say, how do we reclaim the true Trinitario nature, name, that you really should only call varieties which were hybridized on the island of Trinidad and call them Trinitarios. And they're trying to use the true Trinitario label in order to be able to assert the heritage there. But what if we, that's not the way we talk about wine, right? And part of the symptoms of that I see is that we don't have any good denominations of origin, no protected designations of origin when it comes to cocoa beans or chocolate. We have protected designation of origins of wine. We have protected designations of origin for cheese. We have protected designations for vinegar. There's even a protected designation of origin for Bastardsuiker, a sugar, a protected designation of origin in the Netherlands. But we don't have them in cocoa and chocolate. We think about cocoa and chocolate in very different ways. And I would say that part of this is that we've invested so much money in dumbing down, right, how we talk about the beans. And it's really, really confusing, right, to people. So much to the point that I don't think there's any real value in trying to wean people away from Criollo, Forastero, and Trinitario. I just don't know how to make it really, really how to nuance that in a way that is easy to understand, to be able to pull value out of things and be able to talk about how to go about creating the $100 bar of chocolate. Really, really quickly, Mark and Yuri from Blue Spruce in Denver. Hey guys, thanks for joining me. And Clive, as I recall, you were at that 2012 Academy of Chocolate meeting. So you heard me make this live. So you mentioned, firstly, it needs to be seen as a top bar by experienced judges. Great. Secondly, real scarcity, rarity, and therefore the cost of the bean. Okay, so scarcity is a good idea. So the question is, does it need to be real scarcity, or can it be what we call artificial scarcity? So could you get the cost up there by doing a limited edition, right? Thirdly, cost of any additional fine ingredients, right? So, uh, okay, so, and I don't disagree with you, but in this particular case, what I want you to know is let's think about a chocolate as opposed to a confection, Clive. And what other fine ingredients do you think you could add to the chocolate, right, to raise the price? Now, for example, I can walk into a specialty coffee store and pay, $14 for a V60 pour over, right? Whereas normally I'd pay, $2 for a drip using conventional beans. So there's something in there that says, fine ingredients on this particular case is just the coffee beans, not just the coffee beans, but the method of presentation and the relationship you have with it. I mean, I'm willing to do this in part because it's only $14, right? And I can try the experience and decide whether I like it or not. I'm really not out that much cash, right? But I'm interested in knowing what you think other fine ingredients, what might be. What I don't want to pay for is expensive packaging. Okay. I don't want to think, which I completely agree with you. And I don't think the super high in price, because of the cost of the packaging, will help shift the price upwards to the rest of the market. And I don't want to be seeing fine chocolate for posh, rich people only. So Clive, I am in complete agreement with everything that you have to say there. And then what you're doing is you're thinking about the barrel aged thing. Well, what I would say is any kind of aging would be something that we do. It just doesn't have to be barrel aged, but that could be something that's done, right? So, here's an interesting thing that Juan makes. And Juan, I'm really, really glad that you joined in today. And it's like little comments on Instagram are a little harder. You said you would pay $100 for a bar of chocolate if the chocolate maker can disclose where he's getting the bean, shows. Well, no, I don't think he has to pay $100 per kilo for the cocoa beans. And he'll have to disclose the cocoa beans coming from a specific farm, specific genetics, limit the harvest, right? They've been making, right? And I'll pay if an influencer so many years promoting and proving it is not giving any value. So one, apart from the fact that I have to pay $100 for the kilo of beans, right? What I would have to say is I agree with you in almost everything. There's an ecosystem of things that needs to happen together. And one of the things that you point about is transparency, right? And trust, right? That we as consumers need to have confidence that what the maker of the bean is saying is in fact true, right? And that we can believe everything that they're saying about what goes into the manufacturing of the bar, right? And Clive, yes, and Juan, I believe, absolutely yes, right? That we need to be focused on the beans themselves, origin and genetics, and lots of other things like that. And then what we might do is we might incorporate techniques which are associated with other kinds of high value products. So for example, most champagne is not vintaged. Most champagne is blended. Now it's all blended within a house. I'm not going from this house and that house and blending, for the most part, champagnes from two different houses. But most champagne is blended, right? Even if I'm a single malt, it's going to be blended unless they specifically say it's a vintaged year. Champagne is rarely vintaged. It's normally a blend of things. And so there is something having to do with age and blending, which is something that people rarely do in chocolate. So I'm thinking that one of the things that we might do in a $100 chocolate bar is actually think about a way to do extremely high quality blending, right? And to think about how that blending gets done in service of all the things that you're talking about. Who are the farmers? Where are the beans coming from? What are the genetics? What is it that's going on, right? But why does it have to be the beans from a single farm, right? Or a single area? I mean, are there things we might do? So are there things we might do to get very high quality beans and to be able to say, I've been able to find, I'm going to go in and blend these beans in an unusual way. And what I'm going to do is I'm only going to get enough beans to make a certain amount of chocolate, which is going to be put into a certain number of molds. And so there's going to be scarcity there. And it might be from a farmer that only, or from a farm and farmer that only produce a small number of beans to begin with. I'm not going to some farm where they're producing, 2,000 kilos per hectare, or I'm not going to a cooperative where they're producing 10,000 metric tons or representing 10,000 metric tons a year. I'm going to go to an individual farmer, right, who may be producing 300 or 400 or 500 kilos from their farm a year. And I'm going to make something from that. So absolutely, I think those are two really, really good things. Now, and what I will say is that there's a combination of, all right, an influencer or sommelier, Juan. I think that what Clive says about people whose judgment in these things is very, very highly regarded have to coalesce around this being a good chocolate. I don't necessarily need an influencer to do this, although these people are influencers and right. But when I think about influencers, I think about social media influencers, and I don't think that's the right kind of influence that we're looking for. Right. And, I'm really, really glad that you brought this up, Bruce. It's the cost of the beans and fine ingredients are a small part of the cost drivers. And that is often the case. I mean, I've done some modeling of the finished cost of a chocolate bar, and have found that I could double the farm gate price of the beans and not have a significant impact on the actual retail price of the chocolate, or more importantly, the cost of goods sold for the chocolate, if I don't keep my labor costs in check. And if you look very, very closely for more craft chocolate makers, right, the real driver of the cost of the product is the cost of labor, how many hours they're spending and how to do something. If I'm hand inspecting beans, right, and looking at each one individually, right, people think that increases the quality of the chocolate. It might, right, immeasurably, probably. But what I do know it does is it increases the cost of the chocolate, right, because of how much time you're spending inspecting the beans, right? And so I call this whole idea fetishizing labor. So we think of labor as a primary aspect of quality, and it is not the case. And so Mark says, yep, labor cost is the main driver of their base cost. So absolutely. So Teresa, coming in from Roswell, Georgia today, I'm thinking that one could justify the cost of a $100 bar would be if at least half the cost of the bar or more was going back to the farmer, giving a higher value, commoditizing the work of the farmer. Anything else might be the gimmick you are talking about. So certainly I think that rewarding the work of the farmer is one aspect of what it is that I would consider to be part of what goes on in terms of making a high-end bar. I would probably do it the way Sean Eskenazi does it, which is I would pay a price for the bar, a price for the beans that was higher than market upfront, and do a profit share going on. So, so that the farmer gets paid more than they would normally get paid. And then I'm taking the risk of making the chocolate. And the reason why I say because I'm thinking about doing this in 2023, releasing something for this time next year, is making a $100 bar of chocolate that everybody would get to, I believe, is worth $100. So Mark makes an interesting point. So Teresa, I agree with you that what it is you're talking about is one component of what I see is going to be necessary for chocolate. Now, we don't think the same thing when it comes to wine, right? I'm paying $1,000 for a bottle of wine, and I don't think at all about the people who pick the grapes, right? All I'm thinking about is the experience of drinking the wine, right? Or what I've done is, I bought barrel futures, right? And so I was able to buy the bottle in the cask before it was bottled, and to do it at a significant discount. And therefore, because somebody has told me that the likelihood of this is that, when it's a year old, it's going to be $20 a bottle, but from when it's 20 years old, it's going to be $800 a bottle. I'm buying it as an investment, right? And so, that is something that is not factored into the cost of labor. The cost of the people who are picking the grapes is not factored into this at all. And so I think that recognizing the farmer, and I think that there are interesting mechanisms that are already in place that try to do this, that do a very bad job of doing this, and that we can think about using these existing mechanisms, which are global in scope, have been around for more than a decade, to find a way to, number one, source the cocoa beans and to know about the farmers, and to be able to promote the work that is being done in a way that everybody would go, yeah, it makes sense. I get why it would be okay to do this. Pay $100 for a bar of chocolate. And then, Mark, you're absolutely right. The only way to get to a $100 bar is selling the chocolate experience, right? Packaging is a part of that. Absolutely. The story is a part of it. Absolutely. Personality is a part of it. Absolutely. Right. All of these things form a part of why we're going to be willing to pay $100. First of all, it needs to taste, number one. I mean, just the gustatory experience. I smell it, I snap it, I put it in my mouth, I let it melt, and my brain goes, bing, 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 bing. Absolutely. I mean, those need to be perfect, right? But then everything that surrounds it also needs to support that. And the question becomes, how do you provide that level of support in a way that's not gimmicky, right? And that's the important part here from my perspective, is that we're not putting it in a $100 wooden box. We're not being pretentious to say, well, if you touch the chocolate, you'll get the aromas of your fingers, and you've ruined the chocolate tasting experience. That there needs to be another mechanism to go about doing that, to be able to provide that experience without gimmickying it up. But I think you've really done a good job of in your comments of hitting at some of the heart of it. And then Barbie, hey Barbie, how are things in Seattle? Sorry I didn't get out to the chocolate festival this year. I would have loved to have got there, but circumstances prevented me from doing that this year. The $100 bar, I think the three elements would have to be present. Number one, scarcity of the beans and bars. Ritual had a bar a few years ago from scarce beans, only 3 bags, and they had purchased all 3 bags. I think that is a component, right? I think it depends a lot on what those bags of beans were. I mean, I think the guys at Ritual, Robbie, I'm just blanked on his wife's name, do a really, really good job of what it is they do. But you're right? There has to be something special about the beans, and scarcity would be one aspect of that scarcity. You need to know that the chocolate maker is a master at making chocolate before there is a high chance of making a quality product. So certainly I agree in one aspect of this, which is, I don't necessarily, I don't follow wine really, really closely, right? And so it would not occur to me that, I would need to know the name of the winemaker at a particular place in order to know that I could rely on the fact that this is a great quality product. I would rely on word of mouth from a number of sources. I mean, the same thing is true of a coffee roaster. I mean, I know the name of a coffee roasting company. I don't know the actual person standing in front of the roaster doing the roasting. And so it doesn't necessarily occur to me that I need to know the name of the roaster in order to have the experience. I don't necessarily know that I need to know the name, need to know that the chocolate maker is a master chocolate maker, right? What I would think about presenting it is that people who know chocolate taste this and they go, it is technically well made, right? It is, from a texture perspective, all of those kinds of things. It is a well-made piece of chocolate. And at that point, does it really matter? Well, you want to recognize the people who made it, right? And the work that went into making that chocolate. But I don't necessarily, again, for me, I don't think I would need to know that they were a master chocolate maker in order for me to consider doing it. I would consider them to be a master chocolate maker if they made this bar that I thought was fabulous. It goes both ways. So there may be more criteria, as I think. No, absolutely. And Barbie, if you can think of more of them, go over to the Chocolate Life. Yay, everybody, go over to the Chocolate Life, become a member. We have this post on the Chocolate Life, and you can continue the conversation by putting your thoughts in the comments. Please go and do that. I would love to hear more from you. Or you can put your comments in YouTube if that's where you're watching YouTube. Barbie is here on Facebook, so there is the live stream, which is on the Chocolate Life page, and so you can throw your comments into there. That's probably how you found this link, although you may have found it through some other means. So absolutely go and let me know when you think about what they are. Clive, story is important. Absolutely, we think that the story is important, and more. I think that more to the point, everybody who hears the story needs to have confidence that the story is in fact true, right? And it is this confidence aspect that I think is really, really important, because there are stories out there in chocolate. The Mass Brothers, for example. I mean, the truth of their origin story was called into question because it legitimately should have been called into question, according to me and to other people. There were things that just didn't make sense. So the story is important. Who are they? There was also Soma Choc. No. What was the name of the company in Texas that was remelting Bona? All right, and trying to pass it off as their own and charging ridiculous amounts of money for it. So the origin story has got to be good, but the origin story actually has to be true. So how about a fine bar that is also a work of art? So Clive, what does that mean? What does work of art mean, right? Because I've actually thought about this a lot, because I make chocolate bars, right? I have made chocolate bars in the past, but I often am presented with a mold, right? Which is in fact impossible to break up evenly for tasting. So the mold is beautiful. It might be layered. It might have, might have bumps, look like mountains. It could have all these swirly components. It could have breaks in it, which are in the diagonal. I mean, we all know who these bars are. It could be a bar that has a very, very intricate pattern in the surface of it. But I can tell you that if, from a judging perspective, right, one of the things that I find most challenging about judging is when I have two pieces of chocolate, right, that I'm judging back to back, and the two pieces of chocolate are, let's say they're the same basic recipe, 70%. No, just two ingredients, 70%. So roughly 30% sugar, but we don't know the non-fat cocoa solids to cocoa butter ratio. And the two chocolates are a very different thickness, right? And because they're a very different thickness, they have different breaks, they have different bites and chews, they have different melts, different mouthfeels, right? So when it comes to a work of art, how do we create, legit question, how do we create a bar that is a work of art where the nature of the work of art makes it difficult for 2 or 3 or 4 people to sit down and share the same experience, right? So I would prefer to have this $100 bar, something that would easily break into a number of different parts so that the cost of $100 could easily be shared among 4, 5, 6, 8 people, and all of them could have the same experience, right? Let me know, everybody, let me know. So is functionality, right, and a part of this $100 bar, or are we going to focus on a work of art? Let me know. And if it's going to be a work of art, is it the work of art in the mold? What are we doing, right? I don't know the answer to this question. I have my ideas about what the way we go. I would be really interested in knowing, Clive, what you think about that. So Barbie says, I agree that without the influencer opinion, I would rely on my past experiences with their products. Absolutely. Absolutely. But again, I think that the influencer here is, I don't want to go find some Instagram influencer who knows nothing about chocolate but has 8 million followers to push this. Not where it's going to go, I don't think. The influencer I want is somebody who is well known in the culinary community. And it might be a wine expert. It could be a chef. It could be any other people. It doesn't have to be a chocolate expert, right? It doesn't have to be somebody who has gotten a certification in chocolate tasting to do this, I don't think. But it should be somebody where we can go look at them and go, yeah, this person, has serious street cred. And so when they say this is a good product, we can rely on it. And there's, these people are not being paid. the problem with Instagram influencers are being paid to do this. And I don't think that's the way the $100 bar of chocolate deserves on its own, right, to be worth the price we're asking people to pay for it. So Dancing Lion has a quality product that is a work of art. We are impressed by his chocolate on a variety of levels. So I don't disagree. There are lots of people who produce incredibly beautiful chocolates, and they're also nice to eat. And there are lots of people that produce incredibly beautiful chocolates that are garbage, that are awful, right? In my opinion. So I've tasted both, and I'm looking at it and I'm going, you know, I can understand why people like this because of the visual experience. We eat with our eyes before we do anything like that. But I have tasted stuff that is beautifully decorated, right, and poorly constructed, or beautifully decorated and or beautifully molded. Probably a better way to talk about this when it comes to chocolate. But the chocolate itself is got technical challenges associated with it. So beauty is Beauty is an aspect of it, but we need to think about what that means and what it means in the context of a bar of chocolate. Right. So yeah, it's really easy to have, you know, really, really fabulous decorations on bonbons, you know, and with airbrushing and other kinds of techniques on them. But is that what we want to be one of the determining factors in the $100 bar of chocolate? I don't know the answer to that question. Could be, right? But let me know what you think. So the mold is a challenge, but a partnership with a leasing artist designer could get around the even break issue. Yeah, no, absolutely. Clive, I think that's a really, really good point to do about that. We need to be careful. I'm going to share my screen really briefly. We need to be careful. So here is the TOAC Alchemy Collection. So CXM is this guy's name. CXM is his initials. They collaborated with a chef whose name is Charles Michel, who is described as a world-renowned food educator and culinary alchemist. And the conceit of the bars, the idea behind all of the bars here, is that every bar is flavored or is an inclusion bar. And what they're doing is they're using rare ingredients from all over 4 regions in South America. So the Andes, the tropical rainforest are 2 of the 4. And the challenge I have with that, one of the challenges I have with that, which I go into in length, right, is that many of these ingredients I have never tasted before, right? And so, and I pointed out that many, many years ago, Vosges produced an Australian wattle seed bar. And I had never tasted Australian wattle seed, so I have no idea what a wattle seed is supposed to taste like. And I have no idea if it's a good representation of wattle seed inside a chocolate. And so many of the ingredients are in these bars are ones that I've tasted. And the overall impression I have is that none of the ingredients make the chocolate taste better, and there's nothing about the chocolate that they're using that makes the ingredients taste better. And so while I agree that, you know, getting a world-leading designer involved in the mold, yeah, absolutely, this is something that can be done. We need to be very careful about the user experience, because you can hire somebody who's considered to be a world expert, and you can end up with something that, again, in my opinion, in the case of the CXM Alchemy Collection, misses the mark almost entirely for every single one of the products that are in the collection. So they had an expert. He's supposed to have a great taste. Don't know what his experience is in chocolate, but there's something about the way these things got constructed which basically, you know, falls short for me. Now, if any of you goes and tries any of these TOAC products and you think differently, you know, please go become a member. You can go for free. You can go down to the bottom. You can see I wrote a lot. I thought about this a lot, right? Sign up, log in, enter your comments. Would be really, really interested to know what it is you think about them. Right? And then Clive, having said that, you don't want to pay for the packaging. So a very limited edition, top artist design, collectible. Collectible, that's an easy. So what about chocolate makes it collectible? Could it be But then I would say, in terms of my sort of purist way of thinking about this, Clive, using the packaging as a collectible, right, is a gimmick because it doesn't talk about why the chocolate in and of itself is deserving of being eaten. Now, what the collectible might do is it might provide a secondary, it might provide an aftermarket. So I can buy the bar for $100. There's something in the bar, and maybe the scarcity of that over time is something that could be traded, and there will be value in that trading in the future, right? Right. And so, yeah, maybe that's a way to go do it. But, from a purist perspective, what it is that I'm trying to think about is how do we make a bar of chocolate, right? 100 grams of chocolate, right? That is going to be, that people are going to go to say, I know it costs $100, but damn, it's worth spending $100 on this bar of chocolate on its own, right? How do we go about getting to that point? Why do we want to do this, right? Right. And this is how I'm going to sum up. We're a little bit past the hour. Why do I want to do this? The reason why I want to do this, right, is because over the course of the 20 some odd years that I've been writing about and talking about chocolate professionally, I got my first job in chocolate in late 1980, 1988, 1999. So 25 years I've been working professionally in chocolate. I have yet to find a way, right, to make a good full-time living, right, just being a chocolate critic, being a sommelier. And I don't know anybody, right, who makes a good full-time living as a chocolate sommelier. I don't know any restaurant who's hired somebody to sommelier chocolate, right? I may do it in the context of a retail outlet, but there doesn't exist the equivalent of Chocolatier magazine. There doesn't exist the equivalent of Wine Spectator or Cigar Aficionado. I mean, there's this whole bit of infrastructure around chocolate which doesn't exist, that I've been working on and trying to push for since the very beginning, right? The fundamental, I think, important aspect of this is that the $1,000 bottle of wine, right, does not actually cost that much more than the $100 bottle of wine to produce. But the difference in cost, right, provides the resources, right, for there to be professionals, right, whose job it is to tell you why it's okay to spend that amount of money, right? And that's the important part of this, okay? For me, right? So if we can create the structure in the marketplace, right, where there exists room for professionals to be able to have a reasonable certainty that if they got, as Clive says, no master of wine equivalent, yes. Hey, Clive, right. The reason why there exists masters of wine is because I know if I get a master of wine, I'm going to be able to create a career, right? It makes sense for me economically, right? I'm going to be able to make my money back, right? I'm going to be able to pay the tuition for going through these courses, right? If I do any of the existing certifications in chocolate tastings, I don't have any infrastructure, right, which says, you know what, I'm going to make all my money back for doing it. I mean, it's great for people who are in the business who want to know more. It's good for hobbyists who want to know more. If you want to be a judge, maybe it's a good thing. There are lots of different ways to learn how to do this. But I think the thing you're missing here, Clive, is there needs to be a market which is going to pay for people who have that experience, right? And if we don't have a market for people who have the experience, right, and so people can make a living, right, by trading on the fact that I have a Master of Chocolate certification or whatever it is that we want to call it, right, then why? Why are we doing it in the first place, right? So for personal interest, yeah, for hobby interest, it'll make me a better chocolate maker. All of those kinds of things are really valued reasons for doing it. But when it comes to pick a three Michelin starred restaurant around the world. How many of them have chocolate sommeliers? Somebody whose job it is to come at the end of the meal and say, you had this for dinner, and this is what you're having for dessert, and here's what you had for dinner. What I recommend based on what you had for dinner was this dessert and this wine, right? Right. And, and it's from the dessert perspective. How do we go about making that happen? And this person, gets tipped out at the end of the night, or maybe, how do we create that infrastructure, right? In order to do it, right? So we'll go there. So chocolate manufacturers have destroyed the value proposition. People expect the $2 bar. Educated people is an expensive process. That certainly is one aspect of it, but I think that this is something that's happened generationally. We needed to create chocolate that people could eat when they were 3 years old. And what I think what you're talking about is most people are talking about candy bars there, not necessarily chocolate bars, candy bars. But you're absolutely right. The value proposition around chocolate is entirely different. It's something to do, right? The Masters of Wine started small, only 6 the first year, and then it built. You need to build your own market. Yeah, it's true that the Master of Wine started very, very small, right? But it built on a need out of a 1,000-year tradition, or older transition. Before the Master of Wine got started, there were restaurants, and there were restaurants that had sommeliers, right? And the job of the sommelier, before Masters of Wine began, there were jobs whose sole job was to say, you want to order this with a meal, here's the wine you should have, right? And it is a chicken and the egg argument. I personally do not see how having, for example, an IICCT, right, level 3 certification on chocolate tasting, all by itself, right, is going to get me a job in a restaurant, or it's going to get me a job as a full-time food writer, right, talking about nothing but chocolate. There's a lot of related skills that are in there that need to get done. And so there are aspects of the entire ecosystem which need to get, right, filled out. And it is a chicken and the egg argument. What goes first, right? As opposed to do we need more certified chocolate tasters, and having more certified chocolate tasters will convince some restaurateurs that they need this, or convince some publishers that they need this. I've been looking at this for more than 20 years, Clive, right? And I haven't seen any movement, right? And every new chocolate publication that started in the last 10 years has closed, right? Which says something about the demand. It says something about people what they're willing to pay for and what they're not willing to pay for. And just simple matter of economics. So it's a really, really challenging, question. More TV time. Perhaps. But I got to tell you, I will put a link to this really atrocious, what I think is a really atrocious video that was posted on YouTube yesterday by Epicurious, right? It's an ultimate guide to chocolate, but they talk about there being 15 different types of chocolate, and they say cocoa beans are a type of chocolate, which is, not right? And you look at how they talk about it. Even people who are experts in this don't, so-called, just being a chef doesn't make you an expert in chocolate, right? And there are a lot of chefs who claim to know a lot about chocolate. There are not a whole lot of chefs who are, in fact, experts in chocolate. Maybe if the chef had the equivalent of a Masters of Wine in chocolate, she would know more, right? And gender is not the issue here. It's just that it's Epicurious, right? Which is a fairly highly respected. So Susanna, hey, good to see you. Your voice, your picture, and hear your name here. I was in Ecuador in October, in part through the assistance of Susanna. Unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to go up to Manabí. I didn't have enough days in my schedule. So you said 4 years ago we crafted 40 bars from our heritage cacao plantation in Manabí. The price was 120 pounds, right? So, right, for me, right, the answer is absolutely. I think 40 bars is a real niche market. And I think that just having 40 of something makes it easier to sell out. And I think, but I'm really excited by the fact that these things are happening. I think it is possible to do, but what I want to be able to do is figure out a way to be able to expand the scope of these kinds of efforts, and to do more with them. And certainly hearing from you, Susanna, says that, yeah, this is possible to do. That with the right beans, with the right chocolate making, with the right story, it is all possible. But how do we do this for 1,000 bars, right, at a time, rather than 40 bars at a time? Maybe it's 25 times harder. I don't know the answer to that question, but this gives me a lot of hope for wanting to do it. And I have to come back. I am working with people in Ecuador at the moment to see about coming back in the first half of 2023, and perhaps in July as well. And I'm just hoping that I will be able to spend much more time while I am there in order to be able to explore some interesting stuff. On my last trip, I had a chance to talk with Dr. Francisco Valdez, who is the man who's been doing a lot of work on the Chinchipe Marañón group, who's been doing the work out of Palanda. I would love to be able to get to that part of the country. I haven't been to Zamora Chinchipe. I was up at Morona, Santiago, so fairly close, but not exactly the right place. So I'm really, really excited about exploring other parts of Ecuador that I haven't been to yet, and hope that 2023 is going to be a part of that experience. So I want to thank everybody who's been here for any part of the hour. For those of you who've been here since Mayo Chinchipe. I'm sorry, it's just, yes, you're right, absolutely, Mayo Chinchipe. Thanks for the correction. So I want to thank everybody who's spent any part of the last hour or so with me. For those of you who've been here since the very beginning, thank you for watching until the end. This is a topic which is near and dear to my heart. It is a project which I'm going to be taking on for 2023 to try to realize. This input today has been very, very helpful in I would say taking some of the ideas that I have and making them clearer overall. And again, as I move towards this, I will be putting information into the post on the Chocolate Life. So please follow that. And when I do it, you'll all be notified that there is this $100 bar of chocolate. I agree with you, Juan, right? Is that we don't want to make chocolate that is only affordable to people who have a whole lot of money, right? I think that what it is that we can learn, but here importantly, is that one of the things that having the $1,000 bottle of wine, one of the things it does is it makes the $100 bottle of wine seem more affordable. And that $100 bottle of wine makes the $50 bottle of wine seem more affordable, right? So that we're not all focused on the $10 and $20 bottle of wine world, right? We've got this. And so one of the things that I am hoping is that this $100 bottle or bar of chocolate, one of the things that it does is it says to people, oh, there's this $20 bar, and it seems a lot more affordable than this $100 bar. So I'm going to go try this $20 bar of chocolate. Whereas before I might have thought twice about spending $10 on a bar. So there's this whole ecosystem, that Clive is very right. We need an ecosystem in order to be able to make this happen. It's a chicken and egg. Who's going to go first? What's going to happen? All this other kind of stuff. Really, really important to do. And this conversation, I hope future conversations that we'll be having over the course of the next couple of months will help. I want to thank Giovanni. He was here very early on for taking. Bill, really good to see your name. And listen, there's an interesting new packaging material that's coming out of the EU that let's reach out and see if we can talk about that. Could be very, very interesting for some of your customers. Elmer, thank you very, very much for connecting today. Susanna, always a pleasure, always a pleasure. And if people don't know Cardenas chocolate, if you have an opportunity to purchase some of the bars, it's excellently crafted product. And the work that's being done on the farm in Manabí is and elsewhere in Ecuador is something that needs to be supported. And then finally, from Encore Coffee, hey, yes, absolutely. Thanks for chiming in at the end. And I do want to say merry happy holidays to everybody this year. No matter how you manage to celebrate it, because I know that some of you may be not able to get home because of the weather that's going on. So however, and wherever, and with whomever you plan to be celebrating the next couple of days, I wish you that you are safe, healthy, and happy, that you stay warm and you stay dry, and that you have some special things that you are going to reward yourself with and to share with friends and family. Personally, for me, tomorrow morning, my daughter is coming. She normally lives in Massachusetts, so she's coming down to Brooklyn. We're having breakfast. We're going to spend the morning, if it's not too awful, we're going to go and walk along the Coney Island boardwalk from Brighton Beach and just enjoy being together. And then I also plan to share with her tomorrow. This is a bottle of vermouth. It's a house-made vermouth that I got at the Venice Hotel, which is in Venice. When I was there in October, I had a fabulous conversation with the bartender about making Negronis and other drinks. And he surprised me at checkout by giving me a bar of the house-made vermouth. It's astonishing. Going to share that with my... She's of age. I'm going to share that. And then on Saturday, on Christmas Day itself, I'm visiting other family members who live in Manhattan. And we are going to celebrate a Christmas story way by having a Chinese Christmas dinner. And that's how I want to end today, except to say to everybody and remind them, as I always do at the end of each one of these, if you're working with chocolate and you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong. So for everybody, right, I hope that you're working with chocolate. It's putting a smile on your face, a song in your heart, and that everybody you come in contact with, right, can see just how happy chocolate makes you, and you can in turn make them happy as well. So cheers, everyone. Have a great couple of days, and we'll see you on the other side next Tuesday. Not certain what the topic is going to be. I will give myself a little bit of time over the course of the next several days and think about it. But you're all welcome to send me ideas for topics for future Chocolate Life Lives. Again, everybody, take care, be well, try to make sure that you don't get stranded out in the cold. If you're going to or from loved ones this year, or if loved ones are coming to you, be safe, be happy, be well. Cheers.